what Darwin has done is secured for us naturalists an honest way of using function talk, purpose talk, design talk, and we just have to be very careful always to remind ourselves, as you say, that nature has no look at it.
You know, it's a dirty little secret that among us naturalist philosophers, that our biggest problem looks like an inconsequential problem outside of philosophy, and that's giving a naturalistic account of reason.
So this clip is from a gathering of some of the most famous atheist philosophers and thinkers, and almost a hot mic moment where they say something that was pretty shocking. So let's check it out.
I wanted to reply to Dan on designoid. Dan's point is all based upon the idea that natural design is just as good as human design, and maybe it is, but that's not the only consideration. There's also the provenance of the two.
Do you know how old this is, by the way?
This is at least 10 years old, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all about moving naturalism forward. How do we kind of advance our cause?
Okay, got it.
Designs. Alex was suggesting that actually fundamentally even human design is a kind of natural selection. But natural design has no foresight. Human design can look ahead and say, if we go on polluting the atmosphere or get the global warming, in a century's time, there's going to be a disaster, not just for me personally, but for the whole of humanity, for the whole of the ecosystem. That's looking ahead of time. And nature doesn't do that. Nature optimizes in the short term for the individual actor.
So is he drawing a distinction between human design and natural design?
Well, I think he wants to not even use the term design for nature because he thinks there's no intentionality in it. There's no planning, there's no foresight. Versus humans, he says we can do that, which I think there's some problems for that, but we'll get to that.
It puts humans in a separate category from nature.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting. Yeah. Let's continue.
That's doing it. Now that's a very, very important difference. If you assumed that if you used the same word design for biological design and for human design, then you would get the wrong answer when faced with conundrums about natural design, which people do every day in biology. There are people who think that because adaptation is a good thing, therefore whatever is going to be a good thing in the human sense will evolve, but it won't. Species may drive themselves extinct by going hell for leather like the Gadarene swine over the cliff of short-term adaptation. And so I think that it doesn't have to be the word designoid, but something that expresses both the fact that biological design is very, very good, though by the way not perfect, is very, very good, and expresses the fact that it doesn't come about by the same process, and in particular, you get the wrong answer if you're a biologist who assumes something like, well, actually it's teleology, but yeah.
No, that's very good, Richard. And I of course completely agree that that's the fundamental difference between the products of natural selection and the products, some of the products of human design. And the way I argue about this is to say there are reasons why the things in the biological world are designed the way they are, but they're not represented by nature in any way. They're not represented by the process, but they're in effect uncovered by the process. Whereas we are the first reason representers. We human beings, we're the first reason representers on the planet. And that makes a huge difference. I got a paper on this called The Evolution of Reason, which I'll send around. We have this model of design of, my example is Gaudi. He designed the Sagrada Familia. And it looks very much like a termite castle. This slide, the two right next to each other. It's just stunning how similar these two structures are. And say profoundly different processes created these two structures. The termite structure is all bottom up. There's no foresight. There's no representation of reasons. With Gaudi, he's got the blueprints, the manifestos. He's got the reason all out there in advance. That's a huge difference. Still, we also want to talk about the similarities. So I think now it's coming down to which words should we use. And I think we should use the word design for the reasons I said, just to reiterate. Reverse engineering works in biology. And it works because biologists can ask the question, what is this for? And there's not always an answer. Sometimes it's just an inert historical fact that that's the way it is. But very often there is something it's for. And I think that right there naturalizes a notion of purpose, a notion of function, a notion of design, and that we should recognize that what Darwin has done is secured for us naturalists an honest way of using function talk, purpose talk, design talk, and we just have to be very careful always to remind ourselves, as you say, that nature has no look at it.
Fundamental.
This is fascinating. Just we have to remind ourselves constantly just remind ourselves again and again and again. Yeah, it looks designed, it looks purposeful, it looks intentional, but it's not. Which is just, it's really, really interesting.
And it's like, how do we defend our team? How do we, even though the evidence is pointing away from us, try to recapitulate this so that we can use the language that actually addresses the reality, but while holding to our a priori, is kind of what it feels like he's saying.
Yeah, and I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to draw this distinction between the animal world. We see these structures and we see these designs, and then we see in the human world we see structures and designs. And in the animal world, there's no like intentional thought going on there. Like the anthill is not thinking about their design of the anthill. They're just kind of doing what their biology tells them to do, which I think he's somewhat right on that. But he's assuming, and then on the flip side, he's saying no, but humans, we do things intentionally. But there's a whole bunch of problems with that. I mean, one being that the idea that he's assuming that there's no design in nature there, and maybe he's come to that conclusion through other means, but he's assuming that the anthill isn't intentionally designed by a creator like God, who has created this creature to create these kinds of structures, and that there is no foresight or design that goes into that. And so he's drawing a distinction there. But I think what's even more fascinating is, Dennett is a determinist. He's a hard determinist. It's one of the things that he was most well known for. And he says, we are reason representers. So we represent, we communicate this reason. But if we have no free will, then our reason is just a post ad hoc rationalization. It's not the cause of our actions. It's just the way that we kind of rationalize and explain why we do what we do. But in actuality, we were always going to do what we were going to do, and nothing could change that. And we don't act for reasons. We act because of the past history of the universe.
Right.
And so there's really no difference between the anthill and us. We're both just kind of these same kinds of things.
And this is one of those things that I think is so profound about the Bible, is that it's this, ancient document, but that tells us that humanity is distinct from the rest of creation, that we possess the image of the Creator within us. And to me, that now, I'm not saying that this proves that that's true, but in terms of an explanation of what is a human, that to me is a far more satisfactory explanation, because it would explain our free will. It would explain our rationality, our reason, our desire to love. It would explain so many parts about what a human is that we do not see in the animal kingdom. Sure, there's some overlap. You can see, oh, look at the chimps, we're getting along. This is great. They learned how to bang a rock and use a tool. That's all fine. But a lot of times people say, we're 99+% genetically identical to chimps, and I wish that we were 100% genetically identical to chimps, so that we could see that what sets us apart from them is not some missing piece of DNA. There is a ontologically different thing inside of a human that the Bible calls the image of God, the thing that was breathed into Adam, man's nostrils, the breath of life. And I think that, again, that explanation suits the reality of the human distinctiveness in the universe better than trying to, again, sort of build this slow case for, and even in their language, I'm sorry, but their language is kind of betraying themselves, because they're saying there's these two separate categories. There's the human explanation and then there's the matter explanation. And to your point, it's like, why are we dealing in two different categories? Why are you guys even implicitly acknowledging that humans are totally different?
Separate category.
Right. Yeah. Isn't there more here? You mentioned a hot mic moment.
Let's listen to that.
Okay.
Here.
Reverse engineering works in biology. And it works because biologists can ask the question, what is this for? And there's not always an answer. Sometimes it's just an inert historical fact that that's the way it is. But very often there is something it's for. And I think that right there naturalizes a notion of purpose, a notion of function, a notion of design, and that we should recognize that what Darwin has done is secured for us naturalists an honest way of using function talk, purpose talk, design talk, and we just have to be very careful always to remind ourselves, as you say, that nature has no look at it.
Your
Fundamental-
political damage done by using the term adaptation and design away that is obviated by using your term design. So I want to know exactly how we're turning people away from evolution if we avoid the use of the word design.
Well, but we're still going to use the word function and what is it for.
Now,
So we might as well.
I think that, it's a dirty little secret that among us naturalist philosophers, that our biggest problem looks like an inconsequential problem outside of philosophy, and that's giving a naturalistic account of reason.
Wow. That is huge right there. That's a huge admission, and that's the hot mic moment there, where he essentially says, we don't know how to explain reason. Where does it come from? How does reason even work? And it's fascinating because, more recently he wrote, this is Alex Rosenberg, who wrote The Atheist's Guide to Reality. And in that book, he essentially just kind of gives up and says, really, determinism is true, scientism is true, materialism is true, and even scientism, this idea that science can explain everything. He says, yes, science can explain everything, but really we have no free will, and you're not really even a person, and there is, introspection, this kind of internal monologue that you have, that's just an illusion. And to which I say, okay, how did you come to that conclusion, right? Like it's a self-defeating idea. This is, C.S. Lewis in his book Miracles goes through this argument from reason for God's existence, and many others like Victor Reppert have kind of taken this further to say any argument, any philosophical position which makes it impossible for you to reason and come to rational conclusions freely is something that you have to reject because you have to use reason to get to it. So it's a self-defeating idea. And I think this is a pretty startling admission.
If you enjoyed this conversation, you might also enjoy the Wisdom Society, a growing community of believers from around the world that meets weekly to discuss tough questions, to read scripture, and to pray. Within the Wisdom Society, there is also a book club where members are joined by the author of the book so that they can discuss the book directly with the author. Join today, support this channel, invest in yourself, grow in faith, connect with believers from around the world. Click the link in the description to find out more.